Welcome, Luthern, to the conversations on collective well-being. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Great. Please just introduce yourself to us and tell us about your work as it relates to collective well-being.
My name is Luthern Williams, and I am the head of school of New Road School in Santa Monica, California. It's an independent K through 12 school. And the way that my work relates to collective well-being is that, our school is all about liberating the full potential of every student. And at the heart of that, we think is well-being. It's the foundation for the liberation of full human potential. And so it's really embedded in everything we do as a school throughout the education.
We've heard you say before, and we've heard from other leaders in this collective well-being space that institutions have the responsibility to redefine the progress of collective well-being. Why is it important to see the end goal of diversity, equity, and inclusion work as being about collective well-being?
Well, I think that when we think about well-being, I mean, it's obvious to see the ways in which issues like racism impact the person who is suffering from it, and the impacts are just so many that it's very difficult to even articulate. I mean, there's the economic impacts, the physical health impacts, the mental impacts, the health impacts, I mean, psychological, emotional. There are so many ways in which people who suffer from institutionalized racism actually are impacted. But it's also clear, and it was interesting because Isabella Wilkerson in her book Caste really talks about the way in which even those who are in the dominant group suffer, and their well-being suffers as a result of racism, and that they even have figured out that people who are racist actually, there are physiological impacts of the racism on their own health. And that basically it is something that, like the pandemic, I think taught us that we're interdependent and our destinies are intertwined. And that, there's a quotation from the Bible: if one suffers, all suffer together. And I think that's why collective well-being, I think, is essential. We're all well, none of us are well.
I love that. So can you share with us why this framing that you've just put out is important for institutions? Because you're doing it from the standpoint of a school. If there are other people leading institutions, why is it important for them to think about this reframing from an institutional perspective?
Well, I think whether you're talking about, the liberation of human potential in a school, or you're talking about in a corporation, or you're talking about in any sector, I think that at the foundation of that is well-being. And so I think in order to actualize human potential, productivity, innovation, creativity, you really have to focus on well-being and creating the conditions that cultivate well-being in each person. And I think it has so many impacts, negative impacts, if you don't cultivate well-being.
Thank you. And my last question for you is, what does this look like in practice? What are some practical things that leaders can look to make this change?
I'm starting to understand this work-life balance issue. It seems that the millennials have very much brought this up as an issue. How do we sort of, make time for work so that we can be productive, but at the same time make time for life and the kinds of connection with family and with friends that is also essential to our well-being. So I think this idea of balance and really looking at schedules and looking at how it is that we utilize time. Is there opportunities, for instance, when people are off work, and for instance, in a school, for you to really shut down the need to respond to email, which is a very practical thing,
Mhm.
so that they can actually have time to be fully present with the people who fill them up. So I
Mm.
think a lot of it is really reconceptualizing how we think about the work-life balance and how we can preserve the life part.
Ah,
That
thank you so much, Luthern. I really appreciate you sharing these gems with folks and others who are trying to create well institutions. Is there anything else that you would have wanted to share?
Well, I do, because I've really become an advocate of well-being, because even before the pandemic, students in schools were suffering from anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, and I think that schools have to recenter well-being as foundational, not something that is just at the margins of an institution or that's covered with SEL.
Mm.
So I really want schools to really think about, how do we create institutions where the health of student and their wellness in all its dimensions is foundational and not something that is secondary.
Wow. Thank you so much.
Thank
Really,
you.
really, really appreciate the work you do.
Thank you so much.